While describing the military clashes, or you called it as a military civil war within the country, you did not mention the word genocide. And we know that, well, the previous administration has been addressing it as a genocide, which, as a term, as we all know, has very specific international legal implications. Well, do you personally, as a politician who is involved in the process, believe there was a genocide in Darfur first? And depending on the answer, if it was a genocide here at ICAR, we have one of the biggest discussion, and I would say in conflict resolution in general, which is what comes first, whether it's peace or justice, in a very big scope of the issue. Is it possible to go forward with these conferences without the so-called justice, whatever that would be for the people in Sudan, putting out there, discussing it? Is there any movement into creating possibly peace and reconciliation committees, such as South Africa and 50 other countries have been trying to do throughout the last couple of decades, etc.? So please address this issue if you don't mind.
First of all, the issue of genocide. For the definition, and I wish that the video I brought was, we could show it to you, because in it there was a discussion about what is genocide. Briefly, genocide is a situation in which one group is trying to annihilate another group or certain members of that particular group. That's called that's a.
Raphael Lemkin has the probably best
to summarize. But to say it is genocide, it has consequences, and this is what the politicians try to avoid. Because if any government says there is genocide, it is obliged by law or by convention to intervene and avoid it. And I think that's why in America there were these points of views. Colin Powell said it was genocide. The American government, they are trying to say, well, you know, it is war crimes and it is crime against humanity, and, this kind of thing, but not ethnic cleansing and not genocide. To avoid interference, because once they said it is genocide, they are obliged by law to go even sending their own forces to intervene. So it is a politically sensitive issue to say genocide, and the governments tried to avoid it as much as possible. Justice, of course, in any conflict, people rebel because they feel there's injustice done to them. So if justice has not been done, there will be no solution of the problem. Justice is a core. That justice has been done, everybody got what he was aspiring for, not more, not less. That's justice. There is a proverb in the Sudan which says that if you treat all the people unjustly, that's justice. But of course the better thing is to produce them all justly, because injustice to all is justice. So if there is somebody who has the upper hand and he treats the others and they feel that they are not treated justly, they will not keep quiet. That's why they take arms, because taking arms means you will be killed or you can kill. So if you don't feel the thing so much in your heart that you are justified, you wouldn't expose yourselves to death. And I think most of the people who take arms usually, they know that there is injustice done.
You had a question?
I do. You expressed skepticism at what is taking place in Doha right now. And I was just curious, as some groups do unite and form a united front in their negotiations, do you think that there is a difference between the previous peace negotiation that happened, and do you think there's a chance that this may create a more lasting peace at all?
There is no previous negotiation. What happened in Doha was that they started with one movement in the Sudan, which is just an equality movement. And I think this was a wrong beginning, because the problem of Darfur will be solved by all the stakeholders, not one movement. So even if it was left to just an equality movement, whatever they agreed, others can refuse. Because there are people carrying arms apart from them. There is a civil society. And then there are the people who are the victims in the camps and in diaspora. If they don't feel that their problem has been solved, they will not accept it. So the problem is that, to me, I thought the ideal situation would have been that all the movements should come with a common vision, like what your institute is trying to do. That these are the dimensions of the problem, and we all agree with it, and this is what we want from the government. But they must focus on the victims rather than on what they get themselves. Not to become a minister or a governor or something because they took arms, but that there are people in the internal displaced camp. They shouldn't be there. They should be farming, they should be looking after their animals, they should be trading, looking after themselves, not being there for the international community to feed and look after. If this is the attitude, that we are doing all this for the community at large, then it will be solved. But if we are doing for ourselves, that we want to get something out of it, it will not be solved. We will do it, we will get posts. There are many of these people who have been given posts before. There was this peace agreement in Abuja. One faction of the SLM signed the agreement. The man who signed it was given the post of being the senior advisor to the president with all the privileges. But the people in the camps are feeling that their problem is not solved. So they would rather stay in the camps with all the difficulties and all the suffering they have than go home. So the problem is not solved. In my view, the indicator of the correctness of the solution is when these people who are in the camps, whether it's refugee camps or in go home, then justice has been done, and I think there's no reason for anybody to take arms anymore.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, you in the back. Yes. Yes.
Thank you. I'm Natalie Padlala. I'm a master's student at ICAR, and my father is Sudanese. So thank you very much. I have two questions. First of all, what do you think how the elections might influence the referendum on the South? I mean, do you think there can be any role if comes a new parliament to just disregard this referendum for the South? And the other question about the South, I know that you mentioned, do you think the South, if gets independence, can it just be peacefully? The Nuer and Denka, can they live peacefully, or it eventually will come that the North will have to come back? Thank you.
Thank you. You see, the elections in the Sudan now are for many purposes. And one of the purposes is the referendum that comes. And this referendum is for the Southerners to decide whether they want to be in one Sudan with their brothers and sisters in the North, or they want to become independent. My own hunch tells me that they will go it alone, because in the comprehensive peace agreement, unity is conditional. They said that unity must be attractive to the Southerners. The way it is not attractive. The Southerners, as it is, they are not Arabs, not Muslims. The government in the North is saying we are Arabs and Muslims, and we will apply the Sharia. Anybody who drinks alcohol will be lashed. Anybody who has a girlfriend, if he's married, he will be stoned to death. If he is a bachelor or she is a bachelor, they will be lashed. The Southerners wouldn't accept it. They wouldn't accept it. They want to be free. They want to do what they want. not to be dictated also by the diktats of a religion of which they are not members. So the obvious thing is say, well, thank you very much, we want to have our own state. And they are prepared for it. The second thing is they have the oil fields, most of them are in the south. At the moment in this EPA, they have to share it with the government of the north. When they declare their state, they will say, well, look, the oil fields are in our land, and it's an independent country. Why should you give it the northerners? They will put the government in Khartoum in a very embarrassing position, even for the Sudanese people. You have, let one part of the Sudan go with all the wealth there, so many people died there, and so on and so forth. As for the southerners, I think these are the two options they have. Either live as subordinate citizens or go as free, independent citizens, as equals with anybody else in their own country. And they see that in Africa there are many countries which people are living comfortably, in Uganda, in Kenya, and where. Why shouldn't they? And they have the resources. So they will do for that. Some people think, and this is a dream, many northerners think that, the southerners, they cannot rule themselves. This is rubbish. They can rule themselves. And the south thinks that the southerners cannot rule themselves, and they will call the north to come back. There's nobody who would ever ask for somebody to come and colonize me because they cannot rule. It's impossible. So there will be some chaos. There will be some hardship and difficulties. But what choice have we given our brothers in the south? Nothing. If we insist that they should be what they are not, they won't accept.
First, for the last 7 years, I know that everybody knows the suffering of the people of Darfur. At the same time, the movements were separated. I think some people say 19, some people say it's around 16, but I will go with 16. Most of the governments and international community are trying to unify these rebels. But as Mr. Diraige said, they don't have the vision. They don't know what they want. That's how it became a trouble, or it became a problem for them to be unified, because they don't know what they want. Now, I was asked to be a part of what's happening in Doha. And it took us almost a month to bring these people together in one room, because each function, or I can say, has its own agenda, but not declared. They have their own self-centered thing that they want, which they don't want declared. So they came and said, oh, if that's somebody there, I want to be with him in the same room, which they don't consider the suffering of people in Darfur. Now, what happened is that if you read the map, political map carefully, you see that the invitation for the negotiation in Doha, it came according to what the government wants. Because election is in the way, so the government want to do something so that they can feel, so that they can make a campaign that they brought peace in Darfur. That's why they select GEM, because they believe that GEM is the strongest function or movement in the ground. And when they brought GEM, both of them, they have different interests than the people of Darfur. First, the government of Sudan was seeking for the ceasefire, and that's what the goal. For GEM, it was a time to release the detainees, which is like 100 plus. So that was the deal. That's how they came up with the framework that they signed in February 17th or 18th. So that deal was done. Now, what happened with the other functions, who we can say that maybe 16 or 14, is that as soon as they saw that the government is going to have an agreement with the GEM, then they decided to unify. But the unification didn't come with the standards, because each group has different views. I met one guy who came from Libya, and he told me that, he told me that I'm a rebel leader, and why you don't want to consider my movement to become a part of coalition? And I asked him, who is, I know that you're a president, but who is the general secretary? He said, I don't have no. and then said, who's the chief of your commanders on the ground? He said, I don't know. So he said, honestly, I'm the only one person here, and I want to be involved in the coalition. So this is kind of the people that we're talking about. Anyway, it became so difficult for us to bring them, and finally, and I think it was February 23rd, when they formed a coalition under the name of LJM, which is Liberation Justice Movement. But it was poorly founded. And the reason why I said poorly founded is because they are so diverse that they cannot come together. But because they don't want to miss the chance to become a part of the peace, that's how they came up with a coalition. Yes. And they put Dr. Tijani in the head of it. But in all cases, there is no harmony among all these movements. So that's a serious problem. So what I do see here is that, yes, there is a lot of effort being expended for this group to come together so that they can become a part of the peace. But the government is now, they get what they want because they signed the framework with this new movement, I think it was 23rd of February, 18th of March, and that's it, because what they want was also ceasefire. So now the government is relaxed, they want to go for election, and they're going to win the election. And the movement are so fragmented that they cannot come together. And Jim was expelled from Chad. Now all of them are in Doha. So what we do see is a chaos of a group of people who are staying in one hotel, but they don't know what to do. But under the pressure of the international community, what I do read is that they're going to come with a very poor agreement that will not save the people in Darfur. So this is kind of weird as I'm reading it. And unfortunately, I'm going to be back there to work with these people again. I think I'm going to travel day after tomorrow. But this is going to be my flashbacks of what happened and what I do see the situation in Doha.
And I agree with your flashback, and I wish you the best of luck to go and bring them together, if you could. You are part of the institute, and you were also instrumental in the meeting in Siena, and you know what we all agreed on. So we hope that you can manage to convince them, but I have no dispute with your analysis.
You mentioned that the southern region in Sudan has a lot of natural resources, and so even in spite of the referendum and the vote next year, why would the North willingly let South Sudanese break away if they have a lot of natural resources?
Well, you see, the North, there are two things here. One of them is, what is alternative? War again. Then they cannot afford to go to war again. And then secondly, the international community has been a witness to this comprehensive peace agreement. There are signatories, heads of states and organizations. When they gave the right to the Southerners of referendum, and if the unity is not attractive, they had this option. And at the moment, is the unity attractive? I mean, if I am a Southerner and I am in such a situation, I will separate.
You've mentioned war fatigue on both sides, on the government side as well as on the movement side. So could we say that this is the right moment for the conflict to be resolved? And if it is, what does it take, apart from what is happening in Doha and what happened in Siena? Where can we find a breaking point, a point where we can actually take advantage of this hurting stalemate that is happening?
I don't think there is a war fatigue. The government is ready. The SPLA is ready, and the SPLA has threatened. They said that if the government does not fulfill all the commitments in Russia, the war this time will not be only with the South. Probably they are aiming that the Darfur will join them, the Nuban, all of them again. So there's no fatigue. They are ready to fight. And as far as the initiative taken in Siena is concerned, it is, in my view, complementary or even absolutely essential if any negotiation is going to succeed. And if the movements are not united, I don't think there can be an agreement. There will be a stalemate. And they cannot unite without a vision.
I'd like to interject. On that very point, I think that is really quite significant. In Siena, we had discussions on the vision of a new Sudan. And it was exactly as Mr. Diraige says, of course. This was a process. This was open to discussion, different opinions, some consensus, and of course, there was some disagreement by necessity of the complexity of the problem. But in my opinion, the idea of a vision is also a process. It requires a commitment to a process, minimally of respect for the other person's view, obviously, the usual kind of mutual respect that we are always promoting in this building. But it's also a process of recognizing also identities of others. In other words, the process, there's a kind of democratic, in the loose sense of the word, democratization to the process. And one of the key things that was obvious is it takes time. We had 4 days, and we felt like this was, we were trying to do the Lance Armstrong view of conflict resolution. We needed him in the room super fast. So it takes time. And so a vision is not just a fixed idea. And then, as Mr. Diraige has said, I think it's quite right. The government has had that time. And they have policies, of course, and so on. And I think it really requires patience and time, also on the part of the participants. And from what we observed, at least the ones who were in the room in Siena, they were willing to expend considerable energy to that process.
It's a question I have for you about, which I'm sure you've thought about the motivation and the orientation of the current regime in Khartoum. Sitting in this part of the world, being socialized here and educated here and living in a somewhat workable federation called Canada, I have some sense of your vision, and I find it very attractive, and I think it's applicable. So sitting where I am, it's difficult for me to understand how the ruling parties in the government of Sudan have orientated themselves toward the realities of the Sudan, which your history strikes me as indicating there are some real discrepancies between the reality exists and how the government approaches things, particularly around dealing with a multi-ethnic, multiple identity, diverse, regionalized country, and working to govern from the center, not only in a way that highly controls all development and discussion and whatever, but projects an image of a religious state based in fundamental interpretations that obligates all citizens to toe the line and become what they are not, or to be in big trouble. It's very difficult, you understand, not having experienced that kind of orientation from a very powerful party, how they believe, A, that can be successful, and C, how that can be moral. And I know I'm treading on, thin ice there. I'm not a philosopher, I'm not a theologian, but one questions the morality as well as the wisdom of such an orientation to that reality. How do you explain that?
Well, I thought of this, and as I said earlier, that our democracy itself was not based on right parameters. It was based on a religious leadership posing as a democratic political party. And I think that most of the people who reconciled and who were with us in the opposition found where, I'm talking quite candidly, when we were discussing the declaration of principles, we call them in Asmara, when we were together, the young Garang and us from the regions and the Ummah Party and the DUP and the communists, when we came to the issue of identity, particularly religion, the Ummah Party is a religious party, it has rules. The DUP is a religious party, they are rule. To say that we don't want religion to play a big role directly in the politics of the Sudan, they didn't like that. And they were hesitating, and we had arm twisting, and we had all this. And in the end, they found out that, the SPLA, who was a strong partner, was threatening that if this is not done, we cannot be second-class citizens international. So they had to comply with it. Now, so I don't see there's much difference between this government's ideology of Islam being the center of ruling Sudan through Sharia, because both of these two parties were advocating the same thing when I was a member of parliament with the Ummah Party. So, and also, after, it is Nimeri who in September, I think it is September 1983 or 84, who introduced these Sharia laws. And the political parties came after. And I remember Sadiq al-Mahdi came to London after he became prime minister. And while he was in the opposition, he was saying that these laws are not worth the ink spilled to write them. When he came to London and he met Margaret Thatcher, who was the prime minister then, in his first tour out of Sudan as a prime minister, she asked him, Mr. Prime Minister, when you were in the opposition, you were saying that these laws are not worth the ink. Now, why didn't you repeal them? He said, well, I'm just going for this tour and I'm going to America, and when I come back, I will repeal them. He didn't repeal them until the coup took place, because he himself depends on religion to rule the Sudan, and therefore he cannot do anything else. So he would rather cooperate with this government, which is applying the Islamic laws, rather than go with the people who are secular, who don't want the direct role of religion in politics.
Seth, did you go?
And I think there's another point you raised about the second part to your question. The other thing, which is my own thing, is that actually in the Sudan, our brothers along the Nile, from the frontier with Egypt up to Khartoum, they have been ruling the Sudan, whether they were political parties or military. If it's General Aboud, if it is Nimeri, if it is Bashir, they are all from that part of the Nile, which is there. And the Sudan, people say this is the south, this is the east, and this is the west, and this is the north. So now they are feeling that with the education being extended, there is a danger of the power shifting from there, because they're the power elites of the Sudan, going to the southerners, who think they are not Arabs and not Muslims. So they are now gathering together to protect that privilege. So now the conflict is not really so much religion than regional. And I remember I was talking to one of my colleagues in the university who is an Islamic fundamentalist. And I was saying that, look, if you want just to rule you alone, because look at all these ministers, the Minister of Finance, the Minister of Petroleum, the Minister of Interior, the Minister of Defense, and the President, and all these are just these people from along the Nile, from Halfa to Khartoum. Where are the rest of the Sudanese? So he said to me, ironically, that, look, in any country, there is a core ruling elite. In America, they call them WASPs, white Anglo-Saxon, male Protestant one.
Seems like it's changing.
Yes, I know. No, now there is an Afro-American. But this is what he said. And he said now in the Sudan, he should be brown Riverian Arab Muslim. Brown, which is Brahms.
Brahms.
So Brahm versus Was or Wang, I don't know what it is. So this is it now, because these have been the ruling elites of the Sudan since independence up to this time. Now the people in the peripheries, where they are Westerners, they call the people of Darfur and Kordofan Westerners. They call the South Southerners. And they call the Easterners Easterners. And they don't want the government to go away from this circle. And they are using religion, and they are using ethnicity, and they are using everything to remain in power and enjoy the privileges.
Do you think it's possible for the international community to help set up some type of institution or some type of framework for money or investment to flow into Darfur, since the government of Sudan doesn't want to take the initiative to set up that kind of institution?
Well, this is another thing, because I think if we sign a peace process and there's a ceasefire, originally, why the people in the peripheries rebelled? They simply rebelled because they feel that they didn't have enough educational facilities, health facilities, infrastructure, roads, electricity, water. They didn't have development projects to work in. So it was economic. And therefore, if they want peace to be sustained, this must be followed by reconstruction and development. Otherwise, if there is peace agreement signed and the people still continue being as they are, no education, no health, no infrastructure, nothing in the peripheries, they will rebel. So it is important, and I think when they solved the problem and signed the agreement in Niabasha about the South, they had a donors conference in Oslo for that reason, that they want people to collect money for the reconstruction and development of southern Sudan, so that the people don't rebel again. And they collect they promised actually about $4 billion. So in Darfur, the problem is essentially feeling that we are, if you like to call it, underdeveloped, or we have less services, less everything that we need. And if that's not realized by saying, well, let's have ceasefire because some people died, it will not solve the problem. These must supplement each other. Mm-hmm. You have a peace process followed by reconstruction and development. So it will come anyway. Yes. The international community must. And at the moment, the Arab League in Cairo has called for a meeting of the oil-producing Arab world to subscribe to the reconstruction and development of Darfur. They put it about $700 million. So the idea is there, and it should be there, but that's not enough compared with the $4 billion. 700 million is not good enough.
You have the last question.
In terms of the unity among the movements in Doha, I was just wondering how you see that best being facilitated. Do you see the negotiators in Doha assisting, or the international community assisting, or do you think it's something that has to be inherent within the Darfur movements? And if so, how do you get so many movements to unite behind a single vision?
Well, I think we said this quite well, that the movements should come with a common vision. And by themselves, they couldn't. Here, this institute has already taken the initiative, brought many of the stakeholders together there, and they formed the vision. It's acceptable to them, even to the representatives of the movements. But people who met in Doha, apart from JEM, are splinter movements. And the person who came on behalf of JEM has now broken away from JEM. and he wants to stand on his own right. So I think it is imperative that people come to a consensus and should be helped. And I think the institute here helped them. And there is just the second stage, another meeting in which all these leaders should come. And if they don't come, people ignore them. They don't want peace. But at least give them a chance.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Diraige, for a very, very riveting and insightful discussion. So we will have an opportunity afterwards for informal conversation, but please join me in thanking our guests.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
We covered a lot of ground.